I'm delighted to be asked to give this talk today. I want to thank Izzy and Sarah and Leo for inviting me. When Leo asked me to give this talk, my response was, I haven't worked on Hopper in a while. And he said, well, I love what you had to say about J. Edgar Hoover. I said, well, you know, I don't remember talking about that in my book. And he said, yeah, you did. So I went back to my book, and indeed, I did talk about J. Edgar Hoover. And I thought, okay, well, let's see where I can go with this. So that's what my talk is about today. As the current exhibition and catalog makes clear, Edward Hopper focused on hotels and motels throughout his career, beginning with his commercial illustrations for industry periodicals, such as Hotel Management in the mid-1920s, through his paintings during the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. In my 2003 book, Art in the Crisis of Marriage, George O'Keeffe and Edward Hopper, I suggest that many of Hopper's seemingly tranquil paintings of hotels became coated with fears about unrestrained sexual encounters among youngsters and married people engaged in extramarital affairs. I do indeed cite J. Edgar Hoover's concern, voiced in 1940, that these camouflaged brothels encouraged fast turnover in what he called the couple trade. The FBI director believed this threatened families, marriages, and the society at large, an assessment echoed by some sociologists who claim that the hotel endangered family stability and cohesion, resulting in the marriage in crisis. In this paper, I expand on my discussion of Hoover's condemnation of hospitality services as a hotbed of illicit and unseemly behavior by considering pulp magazines and the new pocket-sized paperback novels that targeted what became known as the motel menace. And I have to say, back in 2003, I don't know how I would have found these, because I found these on the internet. So that's the difference between then and now in terms of doing research. This current exhibition and catalog, moreover, encouraged me to not just focus on the works that have the word hotel in the title, but also to consider other paintings as representing the tourist industry by way of rental homes, apartments, and boarding houses. In giving this talk, I am reminded of the first time I studied Hopper in a seminar taught by Babs Gross-Close while I was a graduate student at Ohio State University, and I won't tell you how long ago. A fellow student from the English department had presented his paper on Hopper and sex, showing one work after another and saying with a deep authoritarian voice, because he was a former Marine, "See this woman on a bed, a pillow, and her shoes off? What does that mean? Sex. Next slide. Another bed with a couple and a pillow. Shoes. What does that mean? Sex. Next slide." Literally, that was the talk. For those of you who knew Babs Gross-Close, who know her Babs Gross-Close, who's a very short woman, she stood up to say, "Your time is up." And he said, "You, sit down. Next slide." Well, by that time, all of us in the class were hysterical. And here I am, 40 years later, finding myself surprisingly supporting his argument. By providing an analysis of Hopper's paintings within the historical context of the so-called motel menace. In doing so, I first will examine how popular magazines during the 1930s condemned tourist camps as sites of illicit sexual behavior. I then will examine the images and texts of pulp fiction books that targeted the motel menace before considering Hopper's paintings, in which I suggest that in conjunction, Hopper's images and the texts that we see in these magazines, and pulp books support J. Edgar Hoover's fears. So, tourist camps. During the Depression years, the 35,000 tourist camps had mushroomed along the interstate highway system in the United States, contributing to fears that they allowed for illicit behavior. Polly Arden, in her December 1938 article, published in Journal Crime Detective, performed the role of crime detective who exposes the roadhouse racket, words found across the top of the page. The article includes 2 photographs. In the background and between the 2 columns of text, a woman walks with the suitcase in front of a car being driven by a man, presumably her boyfriend, or is it her husband? She waves goodbye. He presumably assumes she departs for a nice vacation with some friends or attends a weekend retreat. The foreground photograph, however, shows that this same woman is in a negligee, lying on a bed, smoking a cigarette, and about to toss off a shoe. Now, that former student would say, what does that mean? Sex. Indeed, the title of the article is Tourists Can't Trollop. And the image is leading us to read, awaits another man either for an illicit affair or to earn money as a prostitute, which Arden suggests when she condemns, quote, a tremendous new moral, social, and criminal problem in the American scene, the tourist trollop camp menace. The assumption, as the title of another magazine article claims, is that these form, quote, camps of crime, close quote. Written by, as the subtext announces, America's head G-man, that is J. Edgar Hoover, along with Courtney Riley Cooper in the February 1940 issue of the American magazine, it reveals, and I quote, a menace to us all, a warning that it is today a new home of crime in America, a new home of disease, bribery, corruption, crookedness, rape, white slavery, thievery, murder. Is this sounding a little familiar to what's being said today? I don't know. So, but it's not about motels, it's about immigrants, but another issue. Sexual affairs and prostitution. As the subtext alarmingly warns, and I quote, behind many alluring roadside signs are dens of vice and corruption. Hoover and Cooper claim that such tourist camps work in conjunction with dine and dance roadhouses or nightclubs to establish, quote, little more than camouflaged brothels for the motoring public, where prostitutes piled their trade and local boys and girls from reputable families went for nights of thrills. The motel menace. By the 1940s, when Hoover and Cooper condemned the tourist camp menace, the notion of the motel menace also evolved. Hoover's alarm echoed in the themes of contemporary pulp magazines. These contain articles with titles such as Motel Confessions, The Sheriff and Waco's Motel Girls, The Motel Menace, My Night in a Motel, Sex a la Motel, Caught in a Cheap Motel, and Roadside Short Order Sin Motels. At the same time, new pocket-sized paperback novels available in drugstores and news magazines further reveal the new so-called motel menace, with such titles as Motel Mistress, Scandalous Rendezvous of a Back Road Motel, Motel Girls, and Motel Wives. Motel Mistress exposes, as the cover tells us, the private life of a cabin hostess, suggesting on the cover that she potentially sells more than liquor. Jay Carr's Motel Wives is a, quote, daring new novel that reveals the merry-go-round of sex at America's seething highway hideaways. As the photograph found in Arden's tourist camp Trollop, these book covers either show salaciously suggestive women with visible cleavages or in underwear. These highly sexualized and eroticized women represent the traditional exhibitionist role of women to be looked at and displayed as the object of desire for the male gaze. Blythe's Motel Mistress, for example, depicts a housewife in a sleeveless blue dress with V-neck and apron, holding a hand broom and coyly looking over her shoulder as she gazes at three men who are clearly interested in her. Hit's Motel Girls identifies on the cover the characters: Cleo, the young and fresh girl from the farm; Julie, who made the beds and used them; and Ruby, who knows what a hotel should offer. It shows a woman, probably Ruby, wearing a red dress and leaning forward to reveal her cleavage as she makes or unmakes the bed. In the background, a handsome man wearing nothing but a towel, covering his groin, walks out of a bathroom. The cover's text titillates, and you can read this as I read it. The strange story is of three girls caught up in the seamier side of the hotel business. For Carr's Motel Wives, an even more sexualized woman in underwear stands with her back to the viewer as she undresses and looks over her shoulder in a provocative manner. And the cover tells us, Lily disrobed before the open window, watching, waiting. Below the cover entices the reader by announcing a daring new novel that reveals the merry-go-round of sex at America's seething highway hideaways. As Leo and others in the exhibition catalog, which is fabulous, I just want to say that I want to kudos to everybody who wrote their essay in that catalog. It's just, it's first rate. I loved reading it. As Leo and others in the exhibition catalog point out, the commercial illustrations that Hopper created for trade magazines, such as Hotel Management, emphasize leisure, culture, and entertainment in the hospitality industry. This is manifest, as Sarah Powers suggests in her essay about Capron House, dating from 1933, by the luxurious Chesquisette Inn found in the left background. This Cape Cod resort hotel similarly suggests rarefied entertainment and temporary housing, and was probably one of the hotels that Hoover and Cooper in their article attests is safe. According to them, the American Automobile Association, AAA, recognized, quote, this menace to the public is making a determined effort to assist motorists in distinguishing between safe and unsafe tourist destinations. And then they continue. In its directory of motor courts and cottages, the AAA lists some 4,000 cottage camps, which the association has been able to inspect and grade for fair to excellent. But they warn, less than 1,000, not even 1 in 4, are reservedly recommended. As I explain in my book of 2003, Hopper's later paintings of hotels, boarding houses, and tourist homes takes on additional implications in light of J. Edgar Hoover's warnings. The representation of a single dwelling home turned into a bread and breakfast type of accommodation in rooms for tourists dating from 1945, which is in this exhibition and is just fabulous to see in person again, could represent one of the many establishments that refuse the traveling public on weekends, giving prostitutes in the guise of entertainers, hostages, and waitresses a venue. Hopper's seemingly tranquil home is more sinister within this broader context of the sex trade. Thus, the dark street and the darkened windows on the second floor, with their awnings that prevent the viewer from seeing inside, clearly possible on the first floor, take on more ominous tones. Jo Hopper's observations in her record book about this painting's black night, dark green awnings, green shutters, and frame of screen door emphasize the features that close off the interior to the outside. What occurs within these private spaces becomes more ambiguous. The darkened windows of Hopper's domiciles not only suggest alienation, but also evoke the possibility of prostitution and extramarital affairs. Similar possibilities inform Hopper's solitary woman in hotel room, again in the show, who looks at a timetable underscoring her mobile existence. And I have to say, when I was reading the catalog, I forgot who was talking about this painting and talked about the timetable, and I thought, oh, I had no idea she was holding a timetable. And then I read my book, and I say right there, she's holding a timetable. I don't remember what I write. I hope somebody else has that experience. Her suitcase further emphasizes her restless lifestyle. I ask in my book, why this woman exists in this liminal space is unknown. Is she a married woman traveling apart from her husband and family? Is she a single woman? Is she employed and commuting for a job? These questions cannot be answered, but her isolation within the hermetically sealed space of the hotel room indicates her inability, at least in this moment, to interact with other people. Or perhaps she is a married woman waiting for her lover to arrive. Her décolleté and tight-fitting chemise support this possibility. Leo discusses hotel room and morning sun as repeating the woman seated on the bed configuration, and he didn't hear this graduate student's talk. I would add to these paintings Hopper's evocative evening wind, in which the naked woman could be getting up to close the window or climbing into an unmade bed, his equally evocative summer in the sitting, and his 11 a.m., in which the woman seated on the bed becomes woman seated in a chair. In Art and the Crisis of Marriage, I argue these works represent family homes that contain and imprison women, evoking Hopper's theme of isolation of people in modern society. But what if I shift my lens to consider instead that these buildings function, as the exhibition suggests, as rental tourist properties? And what if I furthermore consider these paintings within the context of the covers of the pulp magazines and J. Edgar Hoover's Fear of the Motel Menace? What if Hopper's isolated women are in fact not alone, but as manifest on the cover of Hit's Motel Girls, waiting for an unseen man in the bathroom or another part of the room? Or, as in the photograph accompanying Arden's 1938 tourist camp trollop of a married woman lying in bed in her negligee, waiting for her lover. Certainly, the woman's crouched position before the window, an evening wind on the right, a sexually charged image, could suggest she enjoys the wind blowing across her naked body. Or could she be waiting for her partner to return to bed? Leo's suggestion that this could represent a boarding house or flop house takes on additional meanings within the context of Hoover's fears and the pulp fiction novel's exposure of the motel menace. The pensive woman in slip, seated on the bed looking out a window in morning sun, suggests a similar sense of sexual yearning and pleasure. Is she merely enjoying the view, the sun as it comes through the window, or waiting for a partner to arrive? 11 a.m. raises the same questions. Summer in the City, an excursion into philosophy, similarly depict women seated on the bed. Configurations, in which in one work, a woman sits with a man lying on his stomach naked in their single bed, and in the other, a dressed man sits beside a seemingly sleeping woman in her nightgown or slip. Instead of only thinking of these as estranged married couples that reflect Edward and Jo's difficult relationship, as I do in my book, what if I again shift my lens to think of these as illicit trias within rented spaces? What happens if I no longer consider the seated woman in hotel lobby within the context of a sense of alienation that Hopper connects with temporary public lodging, or not necessarily as an independent woman enjoying her freedom to be a tourist, as Erica Doss suggests, but instead as a sexualized woman reading a book in a public lobby waiting for an illicit lover? Or would AAA have given it a seal of approval with an upscale lobby, making this a setting in which such indecent behavior would not take place? I'm very struck by the way in which Hopper always uses his wife as a model, and I talk about this in my book, and then highly sexualizes her. And in the exhibition, they have a preliminary drawing for this of the woman. It's Jo, and she's got these curled four bangs that make her look kind of frumpy. And I was looking at the drawing and looking at the painting, and I thought, well, here we go. It's like, Office at Night and his other paintings. He takes these drawings of his wife that are non-sexualized, and then he sexualizes her. And I think that's evident here, and it leads to these questions that I'm asking. I very well could be like the fellow student in my seminar over 40 years ago, exaggerating the sexualized readings of Hopper's paintings. Hopper, or someone in the audience listening to my talk, might agree with his contemporary Georgia O'Keeffe when she vehemently rejected eroticized readings of her artworks, saying in 1970 in this famous quote, "The critics who write about sexual symbolism in my work are just talking about themselves, not what I am thinking. When people read erotic symbols in my paintings, they're really talking about their own affairs." I think, however, that the historical context of J. Edgar Hoover's concerns about the motel menace also manifest in popular magazines and pulp fiction novels, provide yet another lens through which to reconsider some of Hopper's paintings of the tourist industry homes. Thank you.